Today, this used to be Seneca Indian hunting ground. That was before the Senecas sold, I don't know how many million acres to the white man for $100,000. After that, then it became, the Buffalo River was very unique that all the grain boats from all the Great Lakes would come into the Buffalo River. They built all these silos up. It was actually the grain capital of the world for a while, because they would bring all this grain in, they would dump it there, they would process it, and then they would put it on railroad tracks, ship it down the East Coast. Even a lot of it used to go over in World War I and World War II, go over to Europe for the war effort. That was huge in the day, and they built all these big poured concrete silos, which were the biggest. That was kind of a new technique for building, to pour them with concrete and everything too, which was huge. So they had all these poured concrete silos. Well, eventually, the St. Lawrence Seaway could take a lot bigger ships, and it was a lot deeper. So a lot of the grain boats started going up there, and that kind of ran the Buffalo silo era out of business. And they slowly started in the later 1900s to close up. And when by 1970, 1980, there's still a couple of them operating up there, but pretty much they're closed down. And where they're not relics, they're empty, but they're so big, and going back to that poured concrete, so they're just, they don't know how to get rid of them. There's no cost-effective way to get rid of these guys, so they just sit there. And we'll cover a couple of other ones. Is there anything else on this slide we want to do?
No, I think you did it.
Yeah, and then, well, there was a guy named Rick Smith, and there's a picture of him in this little book too. He owned Rigidized Metals in Buffalo, is a big company, and he bought this 12 acres he bought this whole, this is the silo city, all these silos in there. There's actually 4 big silos. He bought all of those for under $1 million.
Oh yeah, it was like 125,000.
Yeah.
He wanted access. He wanted road access to his plant that sits right beside that.
And he also had the idea of maybe storing ethanol there. The EPA said, no, baby, no, you're not even thinking about doing that.
His place is right down here, and what he wanted was access from that road into the back of his business. And they said, no, but we'll sell you all of this, not including that. And I think it was 125,000.
Yeah. So we ended up with all these silos and everything, and really nothing to do with them. He found out really, business-wise, there's nothing to do with them. So it kind of became a little bit of an artist haven. Started up these photo workshops with Mark Mayo, who's a whole different story in and of himself, but Mark had a pretty good network of people. So at one point, and I read this, I can't verify if it's true, but
this is Mark Mayo BS. Okay,
now this was actually Rick Smith, but it was the most photographed, the biggest destination for photography in the United States, with Yosemite third behind it. Now we don't know how true that is, but we know that there were over 300 photographers, and a lot of them were kind of world famous photographers that would come here for different reasons. And they're, if you do get a chance to look at this book, and I got a couple of them floating around, there are some beautiful photos in there of all this too.
Yeah, step up to the next slide. Get a return. The history on the workshop, Mark Mayo had worked there actually in the 80s and 90s, doing photographs inside the boats that were still unloading before everything closed down. And in 10 years, there were over 300 attendees. There were 13 workshops in 10 years. The first year, there were 6 of us. I was one of the 6. At the end, I think we'll see what there were. It's a target for people who do urbex, urban exploration and urban exploration photography, because there's all sorts of industrial equipment still sitting there, just abandoned, and you'll see some of that. You'll even see more of it if you just watch the slides that run after we're done talking. The uniqueness is that it was safe. It was safe in terms of were no druggies, there were no street people, no police because it was owned, and there was a watchman who would pitch people out if they were trespassing and going to be a problem. And so for someone like me and for those who know you, I went one time and did all the urbex stuff, went through the whole place, and then said, Mark, I'll come back if I can bring a model and if I can bring some dancers. And so I went back with two. One said, no, I don't want to do that again. The other one said, I'll bring a friend. They brought another friend. They brought the younger sister. We had 5 and 6 models for a while. But the fact that it was guarded, it was safe to take a model. I was not hesitant about the structure or the people. So we
You know, and talking about the urban exploration, that's a big thing for a lot of people. A lot of people like to go out and shoot this urban stuff. You know, there were people going up to Detroit and Gary, Indiana, and it got to the point where there's people that are waiting for photographers up there and stealing their cameras and everything too. So when he says this place was safe, it was kind of fenced in and guarded. And you could walk around and have all these 12 acres, all these big buildings. You could have the run of them and do anything you wanted to do, as long as you didn't fall off or fall down an elevator shaft or something somewhere.
or fall down the loading hole at the top of a silo.
Which was very easy to do.
20 feet.
But yeah.
Let's see what the next one says. This one will either be, okay, this is Silo City, which is what we just showed you in the one map. The boats came in this way up the river, and here is the Cargill elevator.
Mm-hmm.
It is a huge elevator. It's about 1,000 feet long.
Yeah, you'll see
And
a
the
picture of that.
largest structure is Concrete Central, and it's about 1,200 feet long, more than about a quarter of a mile, maybe a little longer. But where we had access initially was these places down here. And this is not an elevator, it looks like it. It's got ribbed sides, like a silo. That's just how they knew how to make a wall that would stand up, freestanding, 100 feet high. What they stored in there for 100 feet, I have no idea. This is a flour mill and its elevator. An elevator and a malt house.
They had big ovens in there that they would take the grain in and bake it in, and furnaces underneath.
This is another mill, and this is a grain elevator, and just another grain elevator. This one actually held grain until about 5 years ago. We didn't go into it in the first 5 years of the workshop, and I explained earlier, it was owned at that time by some commodities guys. They came in and bought that elevator for about $1 million. Then they put 15 million bushels of wheat in it, and I think that's the number, at less than $2.50 a bushel. And when they sold it, it was like $4.50 a bushel. So they put about $30 million in their pocket. They had to pay people to run the elevator, because if you put out grain in these elevators, you have to move it. And you have to constantly move it from one silo to another so that it doesn't rot. So you take it up and you blow air through it, and you put it back in another silo, and it's a continual process. So
A couple of things to note here too. This spot right here, you'll see some pictures that were taken, what we call, you know, the classic picture of the lake and rail. There's gonna be a couple pictures there shooting across the river. This is the Columbia, which is a boat. You'll see some pictures of that throughout here. And like Bill said, the Cargill and the Concrete Central, we've got a couple pictures of that. You know, they look small on a map here. These things are massively huge.
and if you come up and look at this picture later, which is basically, no, go one more. These two pictures are the same, that one and this one. But if you come up and look at this angle view and see how big these buildings are. This is about 1,000 feet. It's about 1/5 of a mile. These places are just huge. And, you know, there's things like right back here in the corner, there's a freestanding spiral staircase from the top, 120 feet down in the dark, okay? And in the early days of the workshop, the first 3 workshops or 4, Jim would guide us down that spiral staircase in the orientation tour. And I did it once, I'd run screaming away before they got to that part of the tour. I have to go pick up the dancers, so. And you can see the boat down here, and you can look at it. Here's the boat and all of it.
And those are a couple things you'll see pictures of throughout here.
You'll see pictures of all of it.
Go on. This is the crew from the last workshop they did in 2022. This is probably pretty typical for one of the workshops.
Well, this is the biggest one, but me, our good friend Alicia, Judd, Mark Mayo, my good friend from San
California.
Luis Obispo, California, Bryn, and Bill Welch, who's a member of this gallery.
Larson's member.
Beth Larson is a member of this gallery. I don't know where Bob Hawkins, he also went one time or twice, and somebody else. Oh, John Murphy in the back.
Yeah. Okay, so now we'll get into some photos of the Grand Capitol.
That's the talking. If you want much more, you have to ask. We'll just talk to the pictures that show up.
Yeah. Sorry about the constant in and out. I'm not sure what that is all about. This is where I said the classic photo shot across the river. I put first impressions of Silo City. When you go there, this is the first thing you do is you get up at 4 in the morning, you go over there and you wait for the sun to rise, and you catch the sun. This is that whole complex behind there where the river comes in both these ways too. And that's kind of the classic shot. I think this was the stillest they ever saw the river.
Yeah, and not only that, but this is an early shot because you cannot see the Columbia, the river cruiser there.
Did that thing ever flood?
Not really. The water would rise about 4, 5, 6 feet. It's basically level with Lake Erie. Now the biggest flood they see, when the wind blows on Lake Erie above 20 miles an hour, it pushes the water to the end and the water will come up.
Now, it's kind of creepy as you go down there, and there are places you can try to go to the basement of this place. The stairs are here and the water's all the way up there. So you can't go down into the lower levels of this.
This is our buddy Jim. This is Jim.
Swanee Jim
Jim
Watkins.
And Swanee Jim Watkins. He's a PhD in materials processing, materials engineering. He ran mills of all kinds all over the country for some big companies. And the story I told earlier, and I don't know that it's true, was that he retired and set about to rebuild an old boat. He got it halfway done and ran out of money. Couldn't find any financing, and so he traded the boat for a case of Budweiser. And beyond that, he was living on the street, and Rick Smith, whose picture is only in this book, I think, found him at the Swanee house and said, "Hey, I have a watchman job. Do you want to come do it?" He moved into Silo City, and he's the one who kept it safe and secure. He knew everything about that mill because of his background, and so he was the font of all knowledge for us. Scary guy, right? He was a good guy.
Yeah, he had a pit bull that he,
Yeah.
with a big old spike collar. He was very unique.
And
It's you.
after the first visit, I said, Mark, I'll come back, but I need a dancer, I need a model, so I can really do my thing with the contradictions of the place, with the human element. And we had dancers who would come for sunrise, in this case about 6 o'clock in the morning, and she was the one who was working in the lunchroom of the hotel we were staying on the third trip. So that's Kim. There'll be another one come up of another gal. This is Shelby. She was the first dancer that I had. This is her mother's favorite picture. And this is titled, and I say this for my wife. If people would ask my wife what I photographed historically, she would say, well, foggy mornings, abandoned places, and pretty girls. Not necessarily in that order. And the only thing better than anyone is all three. And so this one's titled Foggy Morning, Abandoned, Pretty Girl. And so, because it met the requirement of having all three. This is Shelby. She was the first dance model that came. And there'll be another picture of her in this.
This is the Cargill, what we said, pointed out down the river, some of the big places. This is the Cargill grain processing plant that is, I think it says in there, I read the history of it. It was built way back when, but it was finally abandoned in the 1970s. It just sits there, the city of Buffalo has no idea what to do with it. It's just a bunch of big concrete.
It's like mines in the West. You
Yeah.
know, the people who did all the mining walked away.
Yeah.
People who did these places walked away. The city of Buffalo's gone into this one and the next one, and taken all of the structure out of the bottom so that you can't go up in the elevator and get hurt. They've
That's-
taken down the marine lifts, and I'll say something about that in a moment, but you can basically go on the ground floor and they're not gonna bother you.
Right. And if you keep on if you'll see this is on some railroad tracks, you keep on driving back the way, it's a pretty rough drive. Then you get to Concrete Central, and this is the one that's about a quarter of a mile long. You gotta drive up here.
All of the inside stairways and passages are ripped out. And the first time we went, there were boys coming down from the top on the face of the structure. It's about 120 feet.
Yeah.
And we went.
They're coming
So
down.
it's not hard. You can just climb up.
Yeah.
Right.
It's something else, though. I mean, it's just all abandoned.
The basement of that one was beautiful because it was high structure and they ran railroad cars down the main unit. We'll show you some.
Yeah. This is the Columbia. That's a big boat. It used to be a pleasure boat. Didn't they say it was like the biggest floating dance floor on all the Great Lakes or something?
Maybe. And it was out of Detroit, but it's a sister ship for one that went up the Hudson out of New York City. And so they have hauled it out of dry dock in Detroit, took it to Cleveland, put a new hull under it, hauled it to Buffalo, and stored it in Silo City because they can't yet figure out how to get it to DC, to New York. And there's a guy coming in, works on it 2 days a week, and it's gonna sit there
Yeah.
and fall in the river.
If you ask me, it'll never be under power again. It's just too far gone.
If you sit and watch the pictures when we're done here, you'll see, we took the girls up in long dresses and we're on the dance floor.
This is just another view of sunrise of the silos there. That's Marine A that it's hooked to, and of the boat. You know, just a lot of them are just views of all this stuff too.
But story time. This thing on the edge is called the marine elevator. The whole thing is a grain elevator, and these are silos. These are marine elevators, and they're the things that have, and we'll see another picture, arms that come out, go down in the hold of the boat. They run a belt, a leather belt, and lift grain up to the top, okay? And these are on tracks and have huge chains or ropes tied to them, and they pull them up and down the elevators to get the stuff and enter the grain into the right silos. The second year, or their third year, because Judd was there, they announced they were going to take some people to the top of Marine A, and we all want to go, so everybody shows up. And the first thing you learn is that the bottom 2 floors, which is 3 stair runs, what do you call those anyhow?
They're the metal, like,
Yeah.
like fire escapes,
The
metal fire
first
escapes.
3
Ladders.
ways were gone, so you kind of had to climb up the structure. And then the staircase was there, and you go up to a landing and up and up and up. And I was going up, and I got up to about the 3rd one, and I heard him above me say, no, you can't step there. You have to step all the way around. There's no landing at this level. I said, I'll see you guys when you come down. And I came down.
Yeah.
Judd and Alicia went all the way to the top.
Alicia, who was in the Army, I'll never forget that. We're climbing up, and you know, these steps are falling out from underneath you. And Alicia just looked at me and she goes, "Soldier, keep on going." And I was scared of Alicia, so I just kept on climbing. But you'll see a couple pictures there at the top of it. It was absolutely amazing once you got to the top. It was really cool.
I just had to tell that story.
Yeah.
But
that's good.
those marine lifts were just amazing.
Yeah, sea legs, I think they call them.
Yeah, sea legs, you're right.
This one was actually at the top, once we got up to the top. All those holes, if you're not careful, you'll fall down in there and you'll drop 120 feet to the bottom of the silo. So that was a shot once I got to the top of that elevator with Alicia.
I've never identified that as the top of Marine A, but I did not know where it was, so I expected that.
Yeah, that's at the top of Marine A there. And, yeah, you always wish I would have taken a bunch more pictures over there because there's no way you can get from top of it now. This was the one picture I took that I got published in that book right there. And this was in the Perot Malt House, and just this big old machine. And I stuck an iPhone over the top of this thing and just kind of snapped a picture of it. And it kind of came out pretty neat. But
It's a big blower.
it's a big blower that's bigger than you can imagine. It's yours.
That's mine. This is piped in one of the flour mills, and I had to take the lens off my camera, put the base of the camera through it and the lens through it, put it back together. Hard to focus. Laid it on its back in there, put it on time delay, push the button. Refocused it, put it on time delay, push the button. And after about 5 tries, I said, well, I either do or I don't. And so I fetched my camera back out. And it's a very dramatic and dynamic photo, but the place was full of places like this.
Yeah, just another idea, safe as long as you're not falling into anything or.
This is a classic urbex picture. This is the kind of thing that the people who shoot urbex live for.
Yeah, seeing stuff like that.
Okay, back to me again. This is in the basement of the Perot elevator, which is next to the malt house. And it was the white room, and we first went there, it was clean, and it was almost always clean, not sure why. And I always include this because it demonstrates what happens when you can take people and you can shoot models, but if you take a dancer and you say, the light's only here in one place, Shelby, it's here. Shelby, I want you to match the structure here and here with the man-made, rusty, structural thing, and we have a dancer then with her body in the same shape, but she is a very different contrast to the background in the place. Having dancers, they can do that. I mean, you tell dancers, I want you to form this way, they just do it. You say, I need fabric to frame you, and this is in the railroad level of Concrete Central. So this is very high. You see where the exit to the silos is very high in the room. The exit to the silos are almost at the floor. So this is in the Perot elevator, and it's the white room. This is in Concrete Central, and they ran train cars down here to fill them directly out of the silos. And another dancer, these two girls were in dance school from 6th grade till they finished high school, and still dance.
These were mine. This was a little bit of the influence that hanging around with Bill Enough had on me was a couple of the rooms in the bottom of the Pro. That's a mural over there of a dancer under one of the silos, and I just thought that was a pretty cool angle to shoot it with the steps going up and looking through the door. And then this was one of the dancers, and I said, why don't you go in there and try to mirror what the mural on the wall was doing? So she kind of did that, and I just thought that was really unique, having those murals from years ago. I don't know why they were there or what they were doing there, but
Well, it's unique to have the murals. It's also unique to have the dancers who can go make that form that you asked for. Yeah. I live for it. Another one, this gal, just to finish the story, she had worked until 4:30 in the morning. She was the night accountant at the Hilton. She got done with her shift, she went out for coffee, and she came with her dance clothes and her ballet shoes, and there she is. So this is Chrissy.
This was one of mine. Once we got into the lake and rail elevator a couple years later, once they opened that up, we found what we called the new belt room, which is a room, all these belts were controlled machines that used to be down here and were driven from big engines up above. And that was just shot with an iPhone right there because it all happened so fast and somebody got married to sit down. And I'm like, I couldn't even get my camera out to shoot it, but somehow I love this picture right here too. But that was just one of those unique pictures to you catch in a setting like this. And the next one, Bill, you've got a picture in the same room, but kind of
Shelby.
different.
And I have to tell you about the room. You know, I talked, for some of you who were here 2 weeks ago, I talked about natural light and finding the light. The secret is in all these places to appreciate the place, to appreciate the dancer, and to control the light on both. And it's all natural light. I don't take lights in, maybe because I'm lazy, but I tell you, this place, which is where the last picture was made as well, when you walk into that room, if you don't stand there for 30 seconds, you can't even see these wheels. It's so dark. At this point, it was morning. There's a window about this long and about this high. Okay, that's all the light there is in that room. The sun was hitting the bottom of that window, which is a kind of elevator-like thickness, bouncing up to the top and blowing into the room. But you could still hardly see these things. There was light on her. I would have included the window, but I couldn't print it. I couldn't get it. But we're in the dark. This is a magical place. He captured it in the previous picture with.
And the window was so bright, you know, there was such a contrast.
Yeah,
But
it is.
the one thing, when you see, when it looks like the floor is pretty nasty there, it was pretty nasty. I mean, it's oil and grease and water because the windows are broken, the ceiling's leaking. I mean, it was, it's something else. This was one of mine. Again, Bill is starting to rub off on me here too. We're down in the basement, above the floor that was flooded, but there were just these rows all the way down. And who was this? This was.
Oh, this is Megan.
Yeah.
She's the one who was the friend of the first gal we had.
Yeah, she's a yoga teacher and very well in shape, but she was just kind of doing some unique poses and again trying to get all the rows of lights down there. And this is all natural light. This is another place where you had no light down there whatsoever.
Yeah. But notice how neat this is and how clean. This is the elevator that was full until about 5 years ago. And then they sold it off. And so this has been swept and cleaned as they sold the last of the grain out of it. They actually swept it. And so it was about the cleanest place we photographed. Although the white room in the other elevator was often pretty clean.
And as years went on and they started having more functions here, there's more destruction took place. These places got a little dirtier.
Yeah.
This was one of yours, Bill.
Now this is, I shot this doorway early and the pictures in the flow of the stuff that will show after we're done. I shot it the first year I went with a model, and every time I went back after that, this door was closed. Next to the last workshop I went, this was up. We went up there with a model. This is the younger sister, so this is Mary. But it was blowing about 25 or 30 miles an hour in this door. Scary, scary, scary. Tough light, no light added. It's the natural light. And so, again, brave models, dancers who've been in bad situations. And you say, can you throw this fabric up and stand in that door? They just do it. Okay? This is the other one. This is the older sister who's now a teacher in Rochester and the same kind of thing.
That was in 2020. We went up there. That was the year of COVID.
That was the year of COVID.
She's wearing a mask.
This, now that you've said that, That is the only thing in all these pictures that tell you what year it might be. The using of the, as I talked 2-3 weeks ago, white nightgowns, but the fabric and these antique dresses and these lace things that show up in these pictures, they're all kind of timeless. And if you're a fine art photographer, you might really like kind of timeless photos that the people aren't going to come in and say, well, I know that was 1984 because of the hairstyle or the dress style or the shoe style. So all of this, okay, timeless in terms of outfits.
That was one of mine. That was the White Room Bills talked about. That was the first year I ever went, and it was just one of those big old silos. The bottom of it, you know, they go 120 feet in the air, and this is where they let the grain out of the bottom. Somehow, I don't know what they're doing, but I just shot it because it was kind of a neat.
This one actually had a belt that ran along the floor on rollers. They were all removed from the White Room, so it was a good place to see.
This is one of yours.
This is what I would always shoot the first time I went into the place. This is the first time I went into Lake and Rail. If you remember that elevator came, Lake and Rail looks like this, a right angle, and it's got this funny shape down here on the end.
That was also that classic shot that we talked about across the river. That's on the very top of it.
This is it, okay? This is where it turns that corner and the other elevators run out the other way. And I just thought, boy, of all the places that have the belts going in two directions, you just don't ever see that in the top of elevators. So that's always the first thing I do when I go in.
And, you know, to me, what is hard to imagine is back when these places were alive and running, the amount of noise, the amount of dust, the amount of, I mean, this stuff was actually machinery that it ran, and, you know, there were no safety codes or anything up there. I can't imagine how many people got hurt, how many people lost their hearing, all those things. That was one I did. We actually got up on the top of the Lake and Rail one morning, right at sunrise, and those were some shadows that were thrown over on the pro, just shooting off of it. Just kind of.
Remember, the base of these towers is 120 feet in the air.
Yes, we're
And they
way
go
up there.
140.
And the next picture kind of shows a little bit of where, this is when I turned around and shot off the other way, is the Columbia and the Marine A, so we're on top of the elevator right next to it.
The other thing to notice here is that you see these flags. These are an art, if you can see them. This is an art installation in Silo City, supported by the guy who owns it. You want to come do an art installation, come do it here. Some of the ones up front, there's drawings on the wall for kids. Yeah. So all this stuff goes on in Silo City.
Now one, the Cargill elevator we showed you, just got the little tip of it over there, up around the river. Well, this is you again with portraits.
It's a hard job, but somebody has to do it. The models that we have photographed at Silo City are just gorgeous. This is Shelby. She's the one who's been there at 12 workshops. She only missed one. She went one other time after the workshops were done with Judd and I. Just a beautiful girl. And then the second girl who came was Megan, and now she's brought her younger sister, who's this year a college senior, I think, a choreographer at one of the SUNY universities. So that's Mary, and she was the one in the first.
She was the one sitting on the floor of the ballroom. Brave girl.
I put this in just because it's the kind of challenges you face. This is called 5 doorways. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is the favorite picture of the dancer. This is Shelby's favorite picture that we did of all of them. She would say the 5 doorways is mine. Wow. And Shelby outside dancing early on, and Kim, who was the food service manager that friend helped us pick up from behind the counter in the Marriott. And again, comment about this picture, because I had it in the show 2 weeks ago. All available light. There's a little tiny light right up here behind her, a little tiny light over there behind her. You always have to turn her face to find the light, and you have to turn, and most of the light comes off the fabric, and turn her body to get the light coming from 2 directions. So learning to read the light to shoot this kind of stuff is what it's all about.
Might be the last one.
Might be.
This was that Kim?
That's Kim.
Yeah, that was inside the Pro. There's and I believe that this has all been destroyed by vandals now. But there's a room that had real dirty glass and everything. Just had the idea, maybe if she was kind of dancing by herself on the other side. And so that was one I shot like that, and just kind of one of my favorites there too. But yeah, last time we were there, vandals had destroyed all of this. It was just,
Thrown bricks through the glass.
yeah,
broke out
the
whole
whole, all the window frames and everything are all broken out, so,
This was like a manager's office, a process control guy who,
yeah.
behind her are all the big ovens that Judd described earlier, so.
That was the actual malt house. That's the end of this show.
We'll take any questions you have. We're not,
Yeah.
we can talk about the other stuff as it comes up. We're gonna let the other pictures just run, and you can look at it, you can drag us up and make us answer questions about the pictures, but it's kind of an unorganized tour of Silo City that'll come up here. And you're also welcome to come look at this picture. That's from Google. Get yourself one of these books. And did everybody sign up for the drawing?
Yeah, there's a thing to put your name in for the raffle up front if you haven't yet.
Do we have,
There are a couple snacks left up here, and there's some refreshments, some red wine, some white wine, some beer, and then these are just, these are just random shots that you'll see running through here. And I think with all the time up there, we could have both put 1,000 shots in there. A couple of them you'll see that were in the presentation.
Was that a leather belt?
What?
Was that a leather belt you're in? Because it looked flexible.
Yeah, they are big leather belts. Like I said, I can't imagine what it sounded like with all that stuff running back in the day. I can't imagine how many people were hurt, and how many people lost their hearing. And it was a different age.
if you
What?
haven't had too many Silo City
No,
pictures.
Swanee left. He had a fallout with Rick, the owner, and he had a place. The one picture Bill had of him where he had more. I think he might have started drinking again, and he had a place over in the First Ward of Buffalo. We went over to visit him a couple times. I don't know what he's doing now.
I used to work at a really old steel mill.
Yeah.
It sucks. It's bad.
Oh, I can't imagine what it's like.
We had to use sign language.
Yeah.
We developed a sign language.
Yeah, it's just amazing.
Okay.